The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. When Jesus looked up, he saw some wealthy people putting their offerings into the treasury, and he noticed a poor widow putting in 2 small coins. He said, "I tell you truly, this poor widow put in more than all the rest. For those others have all made offerings from their surplus wealth, but she from her poverty has offered her whole livelihood." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise be Jesus and Mary. Dear brethren, we've all heard this episode many times, and its immediate meaning is not quite evident. That there's a difference between giving from our surplus and giving all. I would say that the deeper application regards the generosity of our desire to give ourselves to God. So it's one thing to give part of our hearts to God, give Him something, some of our time, do some of the things we do for Him. It's another thing to give our whole life to Him, to desire to consecrate every action that we perform for His glory, wanting, even beyond that His will inform our very acts. So there's a difference here between just renouncing something and a full Holocaust. That's basically the difference here. It's one thing to just sort of give something, like for example, you got 1,000 sheep and you just sacrifice one. There's a difference between that, which is just partial, and giving the whole flock. And that's what you're doing. That's what this poor widow did. By giving the last 2 coins she had, she wasn't only giving everything on a material level, but she was putting her whole trust, her whole future, and therefore her entire self into God's hands. So there's an act here not just of generosity on a material plane, but implicitly a desire to put her entire existence into God's hands. And so there's a much greater act of generosity, but also of trust, of abandonment, of desire to, as I said, give oneself to God. Even if we're not called to literally give all the coins we have, all the money we have to God in a material, literal sense, especially if one is in the lay state with a family where you're entitled to private property and you need that for serving the good of the family, we're still called to give all in a spiritual sense. In other words, all that we have, we need to desire to put at God's service. Our hearts need to be detached from everything, and we sincerely need to desire to put our whole lives, make of our whole lives a gift to Him. This is, you could say, the deeper spiritual application which applies to everyone. There's no one who is not called to give their whole hearts to God. No one at all. Today we celebrate the Vietnamese martyrs. They were canonized in about 1988 by St. John Paul II. There were about 96 martyrs, Vietnamese martyrs, plus about, if I recall correctly, about 17 Spanish catechists and missionaries, plus about 10 French missionaries. They were all martyred during a certain persecution there in Vietnam. And they're generally represented by this Vietnamese priest, Father and now Saint Andrew Dung-Lac, who was decapitated for the faith. Let us praise our Lord for the witness of the martyrs, who in spite of such violent and horrendous persecution knew how to be faithful to God, trusting in Him in order to give all as a witness to His truth and as a sign of their love, total love for Him. Praise be Jesus and Mary.